and how gradual changes from a dinosaur into a bird, if that doesn't even make sense to you, you see, you can evaluate the claim that that's what in fact happened, right? You don't have a leg to stand upon unless you can have some, you know, reasonably informed and critical capacities to evaluate that claim. It's neither here nor there. I can't. You know, I've read Richard Dawkins' book, Rivers Out of Eden. I recommend it to all of you. It's got a beautiful discussion of how a capacity such as the eye or vision or a wing can evolve out of, from nowhere, so to speak, by a miracle. I fully recommend that book to you as an account of how that process can actually happen. But until we've got that book behind us, we cannot evaluate these claims and many of these other claims. In my next non-rebuttal phase, I'll tell you why you should believe in evolution through natural selection. Okay? Promise.
Okay, well, we are to that section. It's the data section. Ken Hovind, you have 5 minutes to present your material.
Well, my seminar is 15 hours long, so we're going to have to really rush here, aren't we? I certainly, I will have to say right up front, I resent both of these gentlemen saying we're presenting half-truths. I would like you to be very specific. Pick on one, please, and show me. I'd also, you keep saying there's evidence for evolution. I'd like you to be very specific. Give me your best shot. Give me the first best evidence you've got. I really would like to see it. I'm telling you there is no evidence whatsoever for any evolution above the microevolution level. And again, I resent, and I think you should resent, the implication here that unless you have the critical thinking skills to evaluate the data, you really should get some more education. In other words, somebody else is smart. The people who believe in evolution are smart. The people who don't believe it are dumb. To me, that's what's coming across loud and clear. Okay, one of the evidences used for evolution, and I taught biology and earth science for 15 years, one of the evidences that's in every textbook I have seen is the fruit flies. They're going to say they did experiments with the fruit flies. Since you get a new generation every 11 days, they can prove evolution of millions of years compacted into one human lifespan. After nuking and radiating and microwaving these flies and getting them to cause all sorts of mutated babies, they got flies with curled wings. They'd fly around, bzz, 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 couldn't go anywhere. They got flies with no wings. That's a crawl, not a fly. They raised all sorts of mutated flies. They never got a beneficial mutation. None of the millions of flies that were raised in laboratories ever showed any improvement. Every one was detrimental. But somehow, in their twisted logic, these guys who did this experiment said, you know what, all the mutations we observed were worse off. Now, that's a good observation, and I would agree with that. But then they concluded, this proves flies have evolved as far as they can go. Now, that's a lousy conclusion to reach from the data. What you should conclude is God made them right the first time. Thousands of textbooks. I have reviewed literally hundreds and hundreds of textbooks. I have several hundred in my library. You can ask my folks that work for me in my ministry, but nearly everyone I'm aware of uses the peppered moth as evidence for evolution. They counted the moths on the trees and found out they were 95% light and 5% black. In the areas where they were burning coal in the factories, the trees turned black, and so they claimed they were 5% white and 95% black. Turned out later the experiment was a complete fraud. Only 2 moths, exactly 2 moths in 40 years were ever seen resting on trees. They had to glue the moths to the tree and glue a dead stuffed bird to the tree to take the picture as evidence for the theory. The whole thing has been discredited. It is still in textbooks now, though. The purpose of this discussion today is to show what evidence do we have for evolution. What Mike and I think are trying to do, instead of going off in the philosophical realm, we're trying to say, look, there is no evidence. Everything they're telling you that is evidence is not evidence. It's false. The moth evolution is not evidence for evolution. But the students are taught this in every textbook I'm aware of. Actually, it's evidence for design. Then they have the gall to tell the students to think critically with a question like this: do you think humans are still evolving? That's one of those loaded questions like, have you stopped beating your wife yet? There's no way for a kid to answer that question. The question assumes evolution happened. This is not teaching them how to think. This is teaching them what to think. That's a Soviet-style indoctrination type question. The textbooks are going to say we've got evidence from structure. They're going to say it's called the homology argument, the 2 bones in the wrist, the radius and the ulna of all the different animals. And that's supposed to be evidence for evolution. This textbook says comparative anatomy provides further evidence of evolution, which is what the debate is supposed to be about. The commonalities suggest these and other vertebrate animals are all related. They probably evolved from a common ancestor. Now hold on just a second. If you see some similarities in different forelimb structures of different animals, that does not prove they had a common ancestor. It might prove they have a common designer. The same guy built them all. That's why they're similar. Why aren't students told, hey, there's several ways to look at this? I mean, do students come to the University of West Florida to get educated or to get indoctrinated? See, indoctrination only shows one side. My son right now and his wife are speaking in Ukraine. He's been over there for 3 weeks. I've spoken over there before. In Ukrainian schools, former Soviet Republic, all the students ever see is one side. When I spoke over there to 30 professors at the university in Chernovsky, one of the professors was crying. I asked the interpreter, I said, what's he crying about? And she said, he's never heard the creation story. He didn't know there was one. He wants you to keep going. He wants to hear more about this. And the students at the University of West Florida need to see both sides. The evidence for evolution is defunct. There's none.
Terry, you have 5 minutes to present your material on data.
Turn this on again. Am I on? I'm on. I'm not going to respond to the ad hominem, and therefore I'll go on with some evidence. First of all, the theory of evolution is dependent, the synthetic theory of evolution, which is what we pursue today, is dependent upon 4 primary premises. These are the principles through which evolution works. They're natural selection, isolation, mutation, and I've forgotten the other one. Well, see, that's what education will do for you. You just forget. I'm getting old. That's the problem. Isolation, mutation, selection, and drift. I'm not going to explain those to you because it would take my whole 5 minutes. What I will tell you is that natural selection was the ground point that Darwin and Wallace both came up with independently, looking at the same world on opposite sides of the world, looking at the diversity of the species and saying that somehow the characteristics being passed from one generation to another were being selected for. They didn't know the mechanism. That was left to the work of Gregor Mendel, a monk working in Russia in the 19th century, and his work was uncovered in the 1920s and began the study of genetics, which gave us the study of population genetics. And genetics led to Watson and Crick's discovery of the structure of deoxyribonucleic acid and the functions of deoxyribonucleic acid and ribonucleic acid in protein synthesis, the basis of all life. The very same chemical structures in us are in the pine trees outside. And they operate to create the diverse proteins, the diverse biological characteristics and qualities which give us our specific characteristics. Through time, one of the ways that mutation works is that chemical switches start and stop in different processes. An enzyme switch in the genetic material itself determines the shape of your molars and the number of cusps. And we know that we share cusp patterns with gorillas, for example. All of you in this room have the potential of having